your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, and thanks for joining us. Up until Wednesday of this past week, Alberta was the only province in the country to not allow indoor social gatherings of unvaccinated people. With the Christmas holidays just around the corner, Alberta's premier announced a change to that restriction.
We are making two adjustments. First, effective immediately, we are removing the 2 household cohort maximum. This means that you can get together with up to 10 adults from more than 2 different households. Children and youth 17 and younger will not count towards that 10-person limit. Second, this gathering limit now applies to all Albertans regardless of their vaccination status, meaning that both vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals may have small indoor gatherings in homes.
Premier Jason Kenney made the announcement Wednesday morning following a late-night meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Canada's other premiers in an effort to stay ahead of the Omicron virus. According to Kenney, Alberta continues to have some of the toughest social gathering restrictions in the country. Well, the province is also expanding rapid testing. Beginning this Friday, 500,000 free rapid test kits are now available for asymptomatic Albertans on a first-come, first-served basis.
Now, to ensure as many Albertans have access to the limited supply of testing kits as possible, there will be limits on how many test kits you can take. You can pick up 1 box of 5 tests every 2 weeks. That is in any 14-day period. You can also pick up a second one for someone who isn't able to go themselves, provided you have their healthcare number. The recommended usage is 2 tests a week, 72 hours apart, and the greatest benefit is for those who know that they are close contacts of a case. So if you receive a positive result from a rapid test, you must isolate, and you should promptly complete the online assessment and book a PCR test with AHS to confirm the result.
Health Minister Jason Copping adds that these tests cannot be used for travel or to visit restriction-exemption establishments. More information is available on the Government of Alberta's website. A group of healthcare workers who were laid off for not receiving the COVID vaccine are taking their unhappy message to the UCP government in Edmonton. The group with the Alberta Boot Project is asking those who lost their jobs with the Alberta Health Services to take a pair of shoes or boots that they used while on the job, along with a note saying what their position was and how long they worked as a healthcare provider, and drop them off at a location in their community. Those boots and shoes will then be taken to Edmonton. Kate King is a paramedic who lost her job and is one of the organizers of this initiative. She joined Ahel Roberts from Edmonton.
So, Kate, you're hoping that this will deliver a very powerful message to the Kenney government as you drop off this footwear at the Alberta Legislature?
We're trying to bring some humanity to the faceless, unvaccinated rebels. What we're doing is we're personally getting pairs of boots and shoes from people who have been forced into unpaid leave of absence for refusing to cave to medical coercion. And they're putting as much of their story as they can on there. They're writing their job title and how many years they've served AHS to kind of show the Kenney government the loss that firing all of these good, hard workers is going to be to our province.
4 Alberta doctors are suing Alberta Health Services. The physicians have faced termination, restrictions, and disciplinary action for standing against AHS vaccine mandates. To discuss this in more detail is Eva Chipiuk, lawyer with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, which is representing the group.
Eva, what are the issues the doctors have with the provincial vaccine mandate?
The reason they're suing is they are not comfortable with the science behind this mandate. In fact, they say it's not based on science. All of the science points to natural immunity being much more protective than vaccine-acquired immunity. And they just can't put themselves at risk and do something unscientific in their view, not medically sound. And so they've opposed it so much so that they're being terminated as of Monday.
So Eva, what are you advocating for in the lawsuit?
We're asking the court in the short term to tell AHS not to enforce the policy with these 4 doctors.
The injunction application was held over in court last Tuesday until this past Friday. We'll bring you more details on this story as it becomes available. Up next, will Alberta's Premier survive a leadership review? We discuss this after the break. Stay with us. The UCP will be holding a leadership review in the spring. We asked our legislative reporter, Tyler Dawson, if he thinks Premier Jason Kenney will survive.
This week, the province announced it was going to make some revisions and delay implementation. Let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, so this has just been a huge controversy for them. The rewrite of the social studies curriculum was controversial right off the bat. Then once they sort of announced it, school boards were really reluctant to actually sort of take it up and introduce it for this sort of test phase. There were protests from teachers, there were protests from parents, and the government really stuck to its guns for a long, long time until sort of this week when they're going back and they've said they're going to relook at some of the controversial things. They've moved some items out of the curriculum. For example, there was some stuff about financial literacy that was in this social studies curriculum, and they said, well, no, that can probably be in like a health and wellness class. Sort of in response to concerns that there was just too much content in it. So, notable because they backed off on this a little bit, notable, they're admitting a mistake a little bit. The other thing I think that's worth noting about this to some extent is it might also take some of the wind out of their opponent's sails. So I think there's a political tactical move there as well, to sort of say, we changed a little bit, now you can't attack us quite so effectively. So a couple things I think happening with that decision.
Now, it's also worth noting that the UCP did some solid governing this year. They've continued to move on legislative items with a lot more vigor than some other provincial governments. And one example, Tyler, the discussions of an Alberta provincial police force.
It feels like a lifetime ago that the Fair Deal panel was meeting. They released the report, I think, in June 2020, which was like shortly after the first wave or second wave had peaked, I guess, and feels very, very strange in retrospect to think about it. But that's right. They did this whole study on the Alberta Provincial Police Force, ran the numbers a little bit, saying that it would be, maybe a little bit more expensive than the RCMP, but you might get better service in rural areas, more culturally appropriate service, better response times, things like that. But it's just a really good example of how the UCP has done actually quite a bit in the midst of the pandemic. There was some election rules overhauls recently. They've just legislated a lot throughout the pandemic, which, as you mentioned, is really notable compared to other provinces. But the one that sort of sticks out in my memory is the Alberta Provincial Police Force, because it's a big deal. It's a fair deal promise, and also it just has like absolutely nothing to do with the pandemic. So it just sort of shows that the wheels of government, are sort of turning behind the scenes, even if they're not, they're not making headlines every single day.
Now, on the municipal election ballot was the equalization referendum question. This is probably a big win for Jason Kenney because 63% of Albertans said, you know what, it's time for reform. So that, in fact, was a big win for the Kenney government. And
they really needed a win about that time. This was held sort of as the fourth wave was tapering off, about the time that poll I mentioned where he was at like 20% popularity came out. And this equalization referendum could have really been, a referendum on Jason Kenney's leadership himself. But as it turned out, Albertans voted the way that pretty much everyone expected them to. This was a Fair Deal panel recommendation as well, I should note, that this be held in conjunction with the municipal election. And the question, of course, as we've talked about before, is now that 63% of Albertans voted in favor of removing the principle of equalization from the Constitution. The question, of course, is what happens now? Are there going to be negotiations? What can the Kenney government do to make this sort of happen? Is this a political tool that can be used in some other fashion? All that's a little bit unclear, frankly, but certainly a very big part of politics in Alberta in 2021.
Tyler, the ARIELLA KIMMEL lawsuit was also another major political story. It led to some within Kenney's caucus calling for his resignation. Tell me more about that.
Yes, so Leela here had called for his resignation over this lawsuit. It's a little bit of a complicated lawsuit, but the Coles Notes version is Ariella Kimmel was a former staffer for Doug Schweitzer, and she was dismissed. And so she claimed in a lawsuit that she was dismissed because she had reported sexual harassment and sort of a toxic work culture. The government, of course, responded in legal documents saying that wasn't the case. She was let go in line with her contract. and sort of disputes that these allegations of harassment and a poor work culture went unaddressed. They said they were addressed. This just sort of, it blew up a little bit at the legislature with, the NDP really hammering the Kenney government over this. As you mentioned, some within caucus upset about it. So just a very dramatic few days on this lawsuit. And I think, that's probably something we'll hear a little bit about intermittently moving forward, because of course a lawsuit does not end in a few months or even or anything like that. So it's going to be on the radar for sure.
Our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent with the National Post, Tyler Dawson, thanks for the great work this year.
Merry Christmas, Hal.
Up next, we take a look at the impact 2021 has had on Alberta families and the path moving forward for Albertans. But first, a quick break. Stay with us. Welcome back. For most Albertans, our thoughts are on Christmas celebration and getting together with friends and family. However, the Albertans in Fort McMurray Lac La Biche riding are being reminded of the upcoming by-election. With all that's been going on in Alberta, even beyond politics, many feel their trust of the United Conservative Party and the federal Conservatives have been damaged in 2021. Well, home media mom Val Olsen joined me earlier this week to talk about the impact of 2021 on Alberta families and the path forward for Albertans. But we started talking about Wildrose Party leader Paul Hinman, who's from southern Alberta, and he's making a trek to Fort McMurray to door knock and use this election as a foothold for the Wildrose Independence Party. Have a listen. And let's have a look over to the national level. So we've seen what some conservatives are calling a heavy-handed control of the conservative MPs. So when we take a look at what happened with Derek Sloan and Senator Denise Batters, what's your opinion of how or what Erin O'Toole is doing?
Well, what comes to mind, and what and I'm just an echo here because I've heard this a lot from Albertans in terms of Erin O'Toole's conduct. Who does that? What kind of man actually voice messages, like leaves a message on somebody's cell phone to fire them? How weak is that? On a national level, that's just a national embarrassment. This man is leading a party and he doesn't have the confidence or ability to sit down at a table and address with Denise what his concerns are, just leaves a voice message. That is not conduct of a leader. And if that's the best that the Conservative Party can muster, is that serious trouble?
Yeah. Now, Val, the Albertans in Fort McMurray Lac La Biche riding are being reminded of the upcoming by-election. And Paul Hinman has been door knocking and wants to use this election as a sort of a launch pad for the Wildrose Independence Party. So what's your take on this?
Well, Paul is almost like a household name. He has perseverance. And I like that. I think that is what is needed. He's no stranger to the conservative movement. And he's a guy that goes to the doors. He does a lot of door knocking. And Paul has reached out to me personally in the past. I appreciate that because I think that's important to bring all flavors to the table. And from there, good ideas, strategies can come. And so I know I've done a little digging about Paul Hinman, and I appreciate that he was very influenced politically by his father and his grandfather, and he's happy to talk about that. And I also really appreciate that he takes a lot from his childhood. He was a Boy Scout, and I think it just goes to show that politics starts at home, and it starts when you're a child.
Interesting. Now, Val, Southern Alberta is sort of an incubator for freedom-minded politics. So what do you think about the new parties forming on the right side of the political spectrum?
I say let freedom ring. I'm not intimidated or threatened by the more parties and people that launch. This is a freedom movement. You're right. We're in the hub of freedom in Southern Alberta. So, if you can't find what you're looking for when it comes to good representation, maybe it's time that you look in front of the mirror and you recognize that you have what it takes. You shouldn't be threatened or intimidated or think that you're not networked enough or you're not high class society. That's what got us into this mess, is that kind of thinking.
Oh, that's inspirational for sure. So Val, do you see something like a Reform Party 2.0 coming about, or can conservative-minded Canadians fix their party?
This is an organized movement. It's also a movement that has limitless possibilities. They're well equipped, they're well organized. And so I do have high hope with the reformers. But what I want to see is I want them to address that we have a trash can that's full and overflowing, and it's time to clean up the mess. So we sometimes have to, plant the seeds of conservatism and then start fresh, watch it grow. And we need to water it and grow it and nurture it. That's important, because true conservatism starts at a foundational level.
Coming up, if you have a great research idea in the area of agriculture or biotech, but you just don't have the funds to get your hands on the lab equipment needed for your research, we might have a solution for you. That's coming up after the break. Biotech startup companies face a number of challenges getting their businesses off the ground, and that includes the cost of specialized tools and equipment. Well, there could be a solution for all of that. There's a company within the University of Lethbridge that exists to help small startup research companies get their hands on some much-needed lab equipment so they can do their research. Dr. Laura Keffer-Wilkes is the manager of SynBridge, where agribusinesses can come to take advantage of their scientific facilities. Take a look. What is SynBridge? Can you maybe give us a snapshot of what it is and what it is able to do at the University of Lethbridge?
Sure. SynBridge is our synthetic biology makerspace. So we're offering equipment, lab equipment, and lab space to startup companies from Southern Alberta, hopefully student-run companies, to give them a chance to work on their project, work on their business, and save them money. One of the biggest hurdles for a small biotechnology startup company is purchasing lab equipment. It's very expensive, and it can, really eat up a lot of their seed funding. So by renting space in our facility, they save a lot on those initial startup costs.
Many are saying that this mRNA technology connected to vaccines is only the tip of the iceberg, so to speak. So could another company, like say a multinational company or even an Alberta company like Northern mRNA, for example, use your facilities at SynBridge to develop their research and development of their own products?
Yeah, for sure, definitely. We also have a lot of expertise in RNA biology, actually, at the University of Lethbridge. We're part of the Alberta RNA Research and Training Institute, and we have several faculty here that specialize in RNA biology. So it's actually, Southern Alberta and Lethbridge in particular is a really great place to work on something like that if you're interested in it. And we have the capabilities to do those kinds of experiments and testing at SynBridge here.
That's so neat. So what do you see as the future for SynBridge?
The future of SynBridge, I hope is pretty bright. I'd really like to get more startups into this space. We have a few that have reached out to us just recently. And it's kind of between SynBridge and then a couple of places in Ontario that they're looking at maybe engaging with. I think one of the benefits of Lethbridge is that it's relatively cheap compared to a lot of other parts of Canada. Like if you want to do a startup in Vancouver or Toronto, it's going to be much more expensive to live there, to recruit there. SINBRIDGE really offers a very cost-effective opportunity for these startups. You really don't have a lot of money when you're a startup company, so it's cheap to get started. You already have a very well-trained workforce available at the university. These students are graduating with really good degrees, and they're looking for job opportunities. And they don't necessarily want to move to Toronto or Vancouver because there are not a lot of biotechnology jobs currently available in Southern Alberta. Calgary is definitely growing, and Edmonton is definitely growing. But if we can offer those opportunities here at home, I think it's a really beneficial to our community. So yeah, I'd really like to increase the number of companies that we have working here on campus. We have this beautiful new building that we haven't really gotten a chance to use that much because of the it just opened right before the pandemic.
Right.
So there's office space here for companies to rent. There's lots of expertise that they can tap into, and we have the facilities for them to use. So yeah.
That's amazing. Now, I'm just curious, how does SINBRIDGE connect with researchers and innovators? Because you're saying you want to open it up more. Do you have a sales force or a marketing team? How does that work exactly?
We don't actually right now. We have a Twitter account that doesn't get used very much. But if you're interested in connecting, so our email is just sinbridge@ulef.ca.
Yeah, sounds good. It sounds like you're a great place to bring those creative ideas from the mind to the marketplace. So it's a great idea. Absolutely. Dr. Laura Keffer-Wilkes, manager of SINBRIDGE at the University of Lethbridge, thanks so much for joining me today. Great to have you on.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Up next, we feature some of the top local stories from around Southern Alberta. Stay with us.
We lost our 7-year-old miniature dachshund, and we feared we had lost 3 of the cats.
Welcome back. A Raymond couple and their kids are without a home after a fire ripped through their property, burning it to the ground. Video journalist Angela Stewart spoke with the couple about what happened.
Being delivered to us, so I thought I'd quickly run it over to their house. And in the 3 to 5 minutes I was in their house, I dropped off box and came back and opened our door to a house full of smoke.
That was when Baker rushed to the basement to try and find where the smoke was coming from.
Then I got to the top of the stairs for our lower level, and there was just so much smoke that I couldn't get down to find where it was. So
Baker says she attempted to try and save some of their animals, but was unsuccessful.
We lost our 7-year-old miniature dachshund, and we feared we had lost 3 of the cats, but we went back last night, and thankfully 2 of them, one of them being this one. And during the fire, while we were there, one managed to escape.
After the fire, a GoFundMe page organized by family friend Thea McKee was posted online, where over $9,000 so far has been raised. McKee says people have been generous enough to donate food, money, and even Christmas presents.
As for donations of clothes and stuff, I mean, we have so many donations coming in. I have a lady bringing 2 carfuls of clothes and toys and shoes and stuff for the kids. We've had people bring clothes for CJ and for Amy.
As for the Bakers, they aren't sure when they'll have a home to go back to, but they say that they're very thankful for all the donations and support that they've received so far.
We're just so overwhelmed. I mean, it's not just this fundraiser, it's the generosity of the community around us.
During the fire, that the lady up the road that we met once came down with cinnamon buns and sandwiches to
kind of keep us going.
For Bridge City News, I'm Angela Stewart.
Thank you, Angela. Lethbridge Family Services has put out an urgent appeal for their Angel Tree campaign. They still need around 800 gifts to give to children in need during the Christmas season. One of the drop-off points in the Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce, which will be collecting the toys and taking them over to Lethbridge Family Services.
Lethbridge Family Services is one of our chamber members, and we aim to serve and help our members as best we can. So when we saw the notice that they were still needing about 800 gifts for children, we sent out an email to our membership asking for the donations. The Lethbridge Chamber has, through our champion committee, volunteered with this for several years. We have a tree in our front entrance with the little angels on it. And even this year, we've noticed that there's just a little bit slower for donations. So we thought, well, let's just put the word out to our membership and kind of drive that forward to help them.
The chamber is asking to drop off an unwrapped child's gift no later than Monday by 3 p.m. Well, since this is our last weekend show of the year, we thought we'd end on a feel-good note. A beloved family movie that's been turned into a musical is now in Lethbridge. Students from a local high school will be performing Shrek the Musical in its entirety in January. As Micah Quinn explains, close to 100 students are taking part in this big musical production.
You'll be able to see all of your favorites like Shrek, Fiona, Donkey, and Lord Farquaad during Shrek the Musical. The musical is being put on by students from the Winston Churchill High School in Lethbridge.
So Churchill hasn't done a musical in a really long time, and I thought, like, we're coming back from COVID, we might as well go big or go home, so we picked this musical because there was something everyone could play. It's really great for younger audiences, so we have really full student matinees that are happening, and we just wanted to pick something that we could share wide and far with our community here in Lethbridge.
Connor Shaw and Isaac Steckley play the characters of Lord Farquaad and Shrek. The students say that the musicality of the show really adds to the story of Shrek, but still stays close enough to the original.
The message is still just the same. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Don't judge a book by its cover. Like, that's all encapsulated.
It's an expansion on the original concept, and it's a very good one at that. You know, as goofy of a kids movie as the original is, you know, it has a nice message, and it's an interesting expansion on the concept itself.
Johanna Zieber and Hayden Forsyth round out the top characters, playing Fiona and Donkey.
I've never done any musicals or plays before, but it's really fun. She's a really fun character to play, yeah, and I like the songs that just fit her.
Being able to do something is way better than being able to do nothing. Last year I was so bored.
For more information on Shrek the Musical, or to purchase tickets, you can visit the Winston Churchill High School website. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Thank you, Micah. That's something fun to look forward to in the new year. Well, coming up after the break, as 2021 closes in on us, we take stock of Alberta's political landscape with the editor of the Western Standard. Keep it right here.